episode of the Living and Working Abroad show from Private Partnership, where we talk to you about living and working abroad, relocating overseas, whether it's for the tax, for family, for property, or to look at a particular tax issue that you might want to consider going forward. Um, The issues we're going to look at today is a tax swing. We talked all this year about tax creep since the Halloween budget last year, and things have progressed slowly over the year. And so what is the tax swing? Is it left or is it right? This might be a bit political, but it's very much the way of the world. We've had a dramatic week this week with lots of interesting things going on around the world, and especially in the Eastern Mediterranean, where the PROAC's EU office is based in Cyprus. Um, is it right that you should have wealth? Is it right that you should have wealth? Or if you've got a hard left opinion, should your assets be owned? Should your wealth be owned by Big Brother? Should it be owned by the state? Should it be owned by the church as it was in the past? Um, should it be owned by the strongest person, the one with the most might, the one with the most power? Who should hold the agenda, um, and which way should it sway? Should the state control and Big Brother control everything that you do, make the individual choices for individual people? We need to do the right thing. And in a democratic world, that's about freedom of speech, the ability to create and build your own wealth, whether that's in a business, a family, a farm, you know, that individual responsibility to let people build their wealth and then spend it as their wish, not to live a lifetime under an agreement and then 60 years later, 40 years later, 30 years later, to bring in a new reign of taxes because you, the government, decide that you want to punish or charge or tax people in a different way. The politics always swings one way and then it swings another. And we're going to look at some of those in a global context, as well as for your tax swing at the moment. Look at the EU Schengen zone, the relevance of the EU in the Middle East conflict, the Cyprus accession into the Schengen zone, what that could mean for tax residents in Cyprus. Uh, but look at the wider implications of the Middle East settlement as well, and for tax planning and expats living and working abroad in the Middle East, as well as looking at the broader tax creep where income, um, capital, inheritance, and wealth want to be taxed by the establishment. Human societies have ebbed and flowed for centuries. The Roman Empire was created in 750 BC, became a sort of republic 500 years BC, and lasted until 1450. Um, the Western Roman Empire didn't last quite as long, only lasted into the 4th century, but the remains of the Eastern Roman Empire actually survived till 1450, so a very long period of time. Uh, in fact, the founding father, you could argue, was Alexander the Great. He was a Macedonian, but in effect, he created what we know as the Greek Empire, the Greek civilization of the Eastern Mediterranean, with the Baltic states, Macedonia, Greece, Egypt, into Syria, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, and Georgia. All those countries and the Middle East countries were all part of the Macedonian Empire, that Alexander the Great. He died when he was 33, falling off his horse, God forbid. But as a young man, his father, King Philip, was in disputes with his territories. The father died. Alexander seized power, not just of his father's kingdom, but he created what became the Greek and then later the Western Roman Empire. He seized power and he took control, but it was a fair. another interesting point there, Cleopatra in Egypt, she was Macedonian, she was Greek. It was a Greek culture in Egypt for very many years, which is why they're slightly different as a Middle East country. They're not the uh, Arabians of Saudi Arabia. That's a different culture, a different creation. So the Roman Empire was formed, but it split into two in the second century because of the management, and they used this natural east and west, which was based upon the old Macedonian Empire. The Eastern Roman Empire became Greek speaking, although it was a Roman Empire. It did become Greek speaking even before the West fell. But what the Roman Empire did between 700 BC and 1450, that's 2,000 years, is create peace and stability generally across Europe and North Africa and the Middle East and Eastern Europe. Yes, there are still fights and fisticuffs and ebbing and flowing and political debate, but that is a part. But that stability created the ability for people to trade, ability for people to create wealth and opportunity. Um, but the Western Empire succumbed to what we're seeing in Europe now, a sort of weakness of a middle class elite, becomes a complacence. The wealth is built by the wealth builders, but the benefactors create this wealthy middle class, so these comfortable people that subject the people to their whims and their fancies. And the emperor, the leaders wear, the emperor new clothes, which is very much where Britain is at the moment with Keir Starmer a year and a half down the line, um, you know, with his change agenda driving UK into recession and promising now in their November, their second budget, more tax rises and more and spending cuts as they try to implement already to try and get themselves back on track. Politics swings back to the centre, democracies swing back to the centre, uh, countries, populations swing back to the centre. So this is what we're seeing now from the far left Starmer Corbyn government approach of the initial Labour swinging back into the centre. So what can we expect from that? Uh, there's a big immigration crisis now. We promote immigration, expat, legal migration, living and working across borders, sharing cultures. And we chose Cyprus as our European office because it's on the footsteps of doorstep of the EU. We're, we're, we're 200 miles from Tel Aviv, but also we're part of the EU. And you've got this vibrant multinational country where you've got Greek, Turkish, um, English, and Russian, all these different, and Chinese, all these different people all in one place coming together, creating legally a stable basis for growth and the way forward. Um, the world's growth in population um, is a result of the world moving forward. So we've got illegal immigration, which is causing problems for governments around the world. Um, but the reason for that is that medicine in the last 100 years has stopped child mortality. You've got as much as 50% child mortality 100 years ago in Europe. It doesn't happen anymore. And it doesn't happen around the world. Global medical aid into around the world means that children don't die, so populations have doubled. The birth rate hasn't gone up, the population have just doubled because the children and adults aren't dying as early as they were before. So this creates the impetus for people to migrate around the world. And what the world should come together is to support countries to develop and create wealth like China and India, and to support their people not to foster and allow, asylum uh, laws to be abused. They're there to protect people from persecution, not to create criminal gangs that can illegally allow people to cross border um, and migrate into Europe, knowing that the middle class elites of Europe can be soft soaked around that. So we've got social migration and demographic changes as the sign of the time in Europe, but still going expat is a great adventure. It offers a great challenge for people living and working abroad. Human society needs a rule of law and it needs to support and stop the migration that's going on. We need to stop the Europeans turning a blind eye to people walking from Asia into Europe across borders to the French border and then being allowed to get on a boat into England uh, uh, to, to, to live there. Going forward, the world needs the rule of law, legal migration to allow a combination of different people to flourish and combine and create that way forward for the world. What might that bring? If there's a swing back to the centre, if there's a swing back to a different way, uh, we've seen that this week with the leadership that's come from the USA and Donald Trump. From where we sit, from where I sit, and I look at it, ever since Donald Trump's come in power, despite the people that have criticised and condemned him, what he's done is made change. He's taken leadership. He's taken a position. He's reached out to the Chinese, to the Russians, to the Iranians, to the Middle East, to the Israelis, to the Europeans, to the Americans, and some people have gone with him, and some people haven't. But good for him. The soft left, the far left, like to label people that disagree with them as far right or autocratic. If you're far left socialist, uh, then anybody is far right to you. Even if you're in the centre, you're still considered to be far right. So enough of this blaming other people. Let's get on with being one human race and one set of people living and working together. So Donald Trump has got an opinion, he's got an agenda, and it's an agenda that's working. And what we've seen this week is a massive arrangement. So in the Cyprus office, we didn't quite see, but we like to think we saw Air Force One flying over us on its way to Tel Aviv on Monday morning um, to complete the settlement of the Gaza-Israel war. This is a war by um, a, a terrorist political elite in Gaza, not the Palestinian people. There's nothing wrong with the Palestinian people. They're good people. They just need a resolution to a conflict that's gone on for a generation since the Second World War, created in part by the British, by the way, uh, uh, and Cyprus, and the fall of the Ottoman Empire, which was running Turkey from 1450 through to the First and Second World War era. So what we saw is a massive thing. We've seen that Trump has settled down in Syria, who are having democratic elections now. Peace had broken out in Lebanon and in Yemen. Iran has all gone quiet now. And that's been settled. And now Gaza and Israel have settled as well. Um, Unbeknown to you necessarily, but since Trump's come in power, Cyprus, although it's part of the British Commonwealth, it's part of the European Union, wasn't actually a NATO member, even though it was a Western state. So Trump pushed hard straight away as soon as he came to power to get Cyprus into NATO. Um, that wasn't quite allowed, but they become an affiliate member. Now, who would object to that? Turkey. I'll come back to that in a moment. Okay, but with that, there's always been military bases on Cyprus. There's a British military base, and there was a Greek and an Israeli military base. And the great thing to see the combat aircraft doing manoeuvres every now and again. Trump has created a Cyprus military in Cyprus an American military base. So there's military jets. So when the attack went ahead on Iran, uh, or when Israelis were being safely escorted into Israel during the conflict, they were being escorted and supported by a military presence from Cyprus. And now the Americans are here as well. So Cyprus is airstrip one for America as well as Britain in supporting NATO uh, uh, in the Europe in the Middle East and East European and East Mediterranean conflict. So we've taken that leadership, we've taken that stand, and peace has broken out in Syria, Lebanon, Iran, Israel, Gaza, um, and Yemen. So it's funny that, isn't it? So we've seen this week that that's taken place. They flew from Tel Aviv over to Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt, um, and where you had a few different leaders. The British were there, the Turkish were there, and the Americans were there, um, uh, making their peace and making their settlement with the Arab states. So that's an interesting opportunity. Cyprus is on the fringe of these things, and you like to think that now, with Donald Trump being aware of Cyprus, getting Cyprus as an affiliate member of NATO, sitting down and talking in September, the beginning of October, with the Turkish president, getting the Gaza and Israel peace accord settled, the agreement signed, and the Turkish president being part of that, that they would actually sit down uh, in Sharm el Sheikh and say, hang on a minute, let's sort out Cyprus. Cyprus is a divided island. There's a north and a south. It's after a previous conflict, which is 60 years old now, needs sorting out. The EU have not been able to sort it out over the last 20, 30 years. The United Nations have not been able to sort it out since 1974. And there's real grievances on both sides that need to be resolved. Turkey, in fact, occupying, their army technically occupies the north of Cyprus, which an independent Republic of Cyprus doesn't like. So we need to get a settlement. Will Donald Trump do this? Why would he do it? Well, he would do it to resolve the conflict, a 60-year-old conflict on the island. But the other great challenge, an adventure, an opportunity for Cyprus and the EU is to finally get Cyprus into the Schengen zone, which is a full integration then with the EU. It's the last remaining state apart from Ireland that's an EU member but not in the Schengen zone. And in December 24, they were given the approval to join the Schengen zone. So their residency laws and their border enforcement matches up with the EU requirements for the Schengen zone. So if you're, but with one last condition, and that last condition is to settle the border issue on the split island. Um, as countries with a land border outside the EU, Bulgaria, Romania, and Poland, they have to have uh, uh, firm borders to stop people walking into the country, walking into the EU. So this is what an issue with Turkey. So if Turkey aspires to be part of Europe, NATO, and the EU, which in the past it has, and if it wants to be brought into the global influence of Donald Trump, America, NATO alliance, European Union, then it needs to resolve this issue in Cyprus. And for Cyprus to get in the Schengen zone, it needs to resolve this issue with Turkey. So can President Trump, the peacemaker, broker the deal to settle the Cyprus issue. The next step along, 200 miles from Tel Aviv, 150 miles from the border with Lebanon, the coast with Lebanon and Gaza. So can they resolve that? Very possibly. The EU has said to get in the Schengen zone, you've either got to have a hard border across the island, or you've got to have a settlement with Turkey. Turkey president with Trump in Sharm el Sheikh with the Middle East states, a good opportunity to put that on next on the agenda. So my optimism is that President Trump will initiate a settlement between Turkey and the EU, um, and Turkey, Cyprus, and the EU to get Cyprus in the Schengen zone. What is the deadline for that? Well, spookily enough, accession to the Schengen zone is made at the annual EU Council of Ministers meeting in December 25. And each year, the EU appoint the president of a particular country, of a member state, to be the president of that, the EU Council for that year. So 26 EU members, that's once every 27 years, the leader of an EU country gets to be in charge of the EU. So would you believe it? Cyprus is the Cyprus president will be the president of the EU Council in 2026. So what better way to politically celebrate the moving forward of these agreements is to bring Turkey into the fold of the EU, NATO, Europe and Middle East, and settle the conflict either with a closed border and two-nation settlement, but more likely with a single republic as a federated state, so that the Turkish and Greek people can live together on the island, enjoy that, get a fair settlement for all parties involved, everybody's grievances matched, and then live and work together. The Cypriots do that very well with the British, French, Europeans, Russians, and Chinese already living in the Republic, but they could do that with the North as well and with the Turkish. So that's a big opportunity. My prediction is that Trump has got a big opportunity to initiate and accelerate the settlement to the Cyprus split island issue and get Cyprus in the Schengen zone for the start of 26. What's the advantage of the Schengen zone for expats with any EU residents? The advantage is that in the Schengen zone, electronic visas are now coming in. The UK have got them already. The USA have got them. The Middle East have got them. Hong Kong, Singapore have got them. So wherever you're going around the world, you always need your passport, but you often need electronic visa already. It's a way of them identifying and knowing who's traveling in advance. So electronic travel authorities are the way. If you have an ID card, it's in effect a permanent electronic travel authority because it's got the biometric data on it that can be read by the scanners at the airports, traffic cameras, and any other control place where you're going through a security to identify who you are. So that's what the ID card does. The EU have got that. If you've got a residency and you've got your biometric ID card, and your country is in the Schengen zone, it means you can move all around the EU without your passport. That gives you freedom of movement. It gives you some semblance of an open border. The hard border in the EU is when it borders countries that are not part of the EU. So, for example, there's a Spanish enclave in the north of Morocco that has to have a hard border with Morocco because Morocco is not part of the EU. There's a special agreement for the land border between Gibraltar and Spain, but there's hard borders with Bulgaria and Turkey, and the East European countries like Belarus and Moldova. Still, people get in. It's still the EU countries allow people to walk across Europe and then get rid of them by letting them come to the UK. But that is the other side of the EU face. So in the meanwhile, a great opportunity, and I believe that the euphoria and the success of the Middle East Gaza Israel settlement with the working relationship between the Americans led by Donald Trump and involving the Turkish and the Europeans and the British will instigate a settlement of the EU partition and get Cyprus in the Schengen zone, which gives all EU citizens, including Cyprus tax residents, freedom of movement around the EU. Now, the downside of the Schengen zone is if you've not got a residency permit in the EU, you're then limited to you've got to have a travel visa, and then you can only stay for 90 days in any 6 months. Now that's not the same if you're non-EU. If you're an EU citizen travelling into the UK, they don't have that restriction. This 90 days in 6 months is very much an EU rule. That's their version of the Schengen zone. So if you own an overseas property in the EU and you're not an EU citizen or you haven't got an EU residency permit, then going forward, you're either going to have to get the electronic travel authorities, which will automatically vet and ensure that you can't spend more than 90 days in any 6 months, more than 3 months in six in your holiday home abroad. If that doesn't bother you, that's fine. But if you want the freedom to travel, then either uh, getting involved in a Schengen visa or an EU a blue card for a working visa in the EU uh, is one way forward. Or if you own overseas property in the EU, get yourself a residency permit. If you own property in Cyprus, Cyprus has still got the discretion and still offer people the opportunity to backdate their residency permit to EU citizenship. So they give you a pre-Brexit status of residency if you've owned property in Cyprus longer than before Brexit in 2020. So anybody that owns property in Cyprus in their name since before 2020, you can still, at the Cypriot government discretion, potentially get a residency permit that will then give you freedom of movement throughout the EU. For more information and guidance on getting that residency permit, contact us at projektpartnership.com. Why would you want to have a residency permit in Cyprus? Well, it's actually a very low tax place, and there's no inheritance tax, there's no dividend tax, and there's no interest tax on your savings, um, and there's no capital gains tax for expats living and working in Cyprus. There's an income tax on your income, but it's a very, very low tax resort. If you've got a pension fund, um, and you're in England and you want to transfer it away to stop getting yourself the 45% tax, it's a big opportunity to do that. Is it going to work for you? If you transfer your UK pension into a QROPS offshore, you get a 25% tax at source. So it's a fixed tax that was put in by the last government before you can draw the money out and transfer it abroad. The British taxman decided that you saved your money up in your pension fund for your future, but you have to keep the fund in the UK. What you can still do is if you as an individual are living and working abroad, in Cyprus, for example, you can draw your pension fund and pay a flat rate 5% tax. So if you're a Cyprus tax resident and you've got a UK pension fund, you get your residency permit, you get your tax residency in Cyprus, and then you register your pension income in Cyprus. You can then draw the whole of your self-invested pension fund at 5% flat rate tax, whether it's 100,000 or whether it's 10 million, it's still 5% tax. So, we know that if you're earning more than 110,000 in pension and earnings in a year in the UK, you're on 45% tax. So it's a 40% tax saving if you're a Cyprus tax resident, which you can do because under the double taxation treaty at the moment, the UK allow you to transfer your pension tax into Cyprus, but that might change. We talked about the tax creep. We talked about swings one way and another, and the person advising uh, the, the, the Treasury at the moment it's not the Chancellor, Torsten Bell. It is a very much a hard line. The pension minister looking at the pension funds and how they can get money out of those pension funds, irrespective of the fact that you might have spent 60, 70 years with an agreement that you can save into that pension fund to get income in your retirement. A government with the majority can vote to increase your income tax uh, or change the rules on how you receive the tax. So there's potential things that could be attacked with that pension fund, and you may not have the flexibility to be able to do the things that you've done in the past after the budget. So let's have a look at some of the things that they could do. So, for example, they, if you look at countries like Canada, you can't always move your pension. In the UK already, they've changed the rules under the last government so that if you've got a government service pension, it has to be taxed in the UK. And so they could potentially make that a new rule uh, for, for all pension funds. So if you've got a self-invested pension where for 50, 60 years you built up a fund thinking that that would give you a comfortable retirement and wealth for your family, um, you're not necessarily entitled to have that wealth anymore under the new government. Um, is that right? Is that left? Who knows? But up until last year, the Halloween budget, if you had a self-invested pension fund and you died, potentially all that fund could go to your widow and your family without any additional tax because you saved that for your wealth, for your family. In the last Halloween budget, the government decided that no, you shouldn't have that. The government should have a tax. So they've introduced inheritance tax of 40% on that money. So that straight away, that you've got an extra tax on there. Now, primarily what that does is not impact on the pension income that you receive, whether you receive that income in the UK up to 45% or in Cyprus at 5%. What it impacts is your death benefit, where in inheritance tax, you've got a £325,000 allowance. Well, now your pension fund goes towards using up that allowance. The allowance is frozen, so more of your wealth is going to be swinging into the tax umbrella when you die. So I don't think in the budget that they're going to impact on the tax-free lump sum. They still allow you to draw the 25%, but it could stop you uh, registering your tax to pay pension tax on your income from a pension abroad. Now, at the moment, you can move abroad and withdraw your whole of your self-invested pension fund. Um, will we see in November 25's budget a tax hike which says you can no longer move your pension fund to have it taxed in another country? While that wouldn't necessarily generate additional tax for the government today, what it would do is lock everybody into the UK tax system. It gives the UK government a better future tax rating, and therefore their credit rating with their money lenders goes down, and they can borrow more money to spend more money, which all has got to be paid back by the taxpayer anyway. But they're locking in all the pension funds, not to be taxed today, but to be taxed when you draw it in the future. So if you've got a £1 million pension fund and you die, before the budget, sorry, it died before April last year, it could go tax-free to your family. Going forward, inheritance tax is going to be applied when you die. And then the next stage is it going to be frozen so you can't move that income abroad? It's going to be fixed into the UK. We've got fixed capital gains on property in the UK. We've got fixed rental income taxes in the UK. We've got a fixed or a enforced tax payment on your pension fund if you transfer the whole fund outside the UK. If you've got a government service pension, it's taxed in the UK at source. It can't be transferred abroad. So maybe the next thing is they could stop the right of a UK citizen to transfer that pension to be taxed in another jurisdiction. If you're considering relocating abroad, or you've got a tax residency in Cyprus or in the EU, consider how you can draw your pension now and avoid taxes in before the next budget. Contact us at projectpartnership.com. Let's have a look at how else the tax rises and spending cuts might be paid for in the coming budget. So the Labour government are now confirming that they're going to be increasing taxes and cutting spending in the next budget. They're going to blame everybody else. It's the failing economy, it's the faltering economy, and it's the policies that aren't working of their hard left government, which means they're beginning to swing back to the centre, but they have to get that moderate centre of the balance of spending and tax rises along the way. So we've already looked at a discrete way for them to increase tax take and improve their tax credibility with the money markets is to stop transferring pensions out. But what about inheritances as well? Inheritance tax, capital gains tax have been around 60 years, inheritance tax have been around about 30 years, and they keep going up and they keep going up. And so the little tweaks that could be done there to clean up inheritance tax and clean up capital gains tax to make it simpler. And so the marketing of the budget is we're going to simplify the tax regime and make it a simpler, easier place for us all to live in. Okay. So we've got now is in the Halloween budget, capital gains tax went up by 80% from 10 to 18%. But now we've got an 18%, 24% capital gains tax rate and a 20, 40 and 45% income tax rate and a 40% inheritance tax rate. So why not simplify that? Why not bring it down to 2 or maybe 3 tax rates? Okay, so the confusion with the transfer from 40 to 45% tax rate is an unnecessary complication by a government that just needs to get off the fence. Not this government, it's the last government as well. So when they introduced a 45% tax rate, they then tried to soften it so that it's a graduated increase from 40 to 45% when your earnings are between 100 and 125,000. Above 125,000, everything's taxed at 45%. So graduated from 40 to 45 between there. So you could simplify that. That's an easier way. So you abolished 100,000 rate and you abolished the difference and just made 45% from 100,000, or why not merge the 40 and 45% rate and charge all high rate taxpayers 45%? That would increase income tax in theory, so that they might not want to do that. So what's more likely is that they would get rid of that band between 100 and 125, just simplify the tax regime. So it actually means that you stop paying 45% as a simple rate over 100,000. So that'd be a simple way for them to increase the taxes on income with the tax bands. Um, but now you've increased capital gains tax from 18 to 20 to 18 and 24% for basic and high rate taxes. Why not align those? Now, capital gains tax is not a tax on working people; it's a tax on people who've got wealth. And if you're a left-leaning government, if you're a far-left government, what entitlement you've got to own any wealth? So let's tax it, okay? So why not go the whole hog and take the capital gains tax of 18 and 24% and align it with income taxes to 20 and 40%. So that's another potential threat that people have got. And the only way to avoid that is to realise your gains or put the assets into trust away from your individual tax liability, where you can still gift them without a capital gains liability now. For more information and guidance on how to gift properties using tax exemptions for family and business, contact us at proactpartnership.com. So so the capital gains, the rates may or may not go up. They may stay the same, but to simplify it, make 1820, make 2440, and it's not increasing in income taxes. Thresholds on taxes have been frozen forever, and they're committed them for the rest of the budget, so they're not going to extend them anymore. But will they play around with that? With inheritance tax, you've got a 325,000 husband and individual allowance, so a husband and wife can leave 650. But there's also an additional 175,000 allowance that you've got against your principal private residence. Now this is a death duty, so again, why not simplify the tax regime and remove that? Now you could remove it by increasing the band for everybody, but removing that. So you could, for example, you could increase it for everybody from 325 to 350,000 to say, look, we've increased the band that nobody else has done for the last 15 years. But then you could take away the principal private residence relief on that on inheritance tax, which means that instead of potentially £1 million being passed by a married couple to their children, or £500,000 by an individual, is then be reduced down to the 350. So that will be a way of getting more tax under the inheritance tax of 40%, bearing in mind that we've already added in whatever your pension fund is into that. So you've got a pension fund of 325,000. That is now using up your personal allowance on the inheritance tax. So everything else that you own is going to be 40% inheritance tax. So your investments, your savings, your valuables, your home, inheritance tax is charged on your house as well. Yes, you've got 175,000 relief, but if you've got a £500,000 property, that still means you've got 325,000 going towards inheritance tax liability. So some easy little things that they can do just to tweak capital bands and inheritance tax rate bands without increasing taxes on working people. So not increasing income taxes, increasing capital taxes. There's gifts. You can make big gifts into family, but you can actually make small gifts out of excessive income. So you can make 2,000-3,000 a year gifts to children to put into ISAs or savings plans or what have you. That's another way of stopping that. That would mean that you're going to keep a bit of extra money in the pot for inheritance tax. So if you can't gift it to your children without tax, you're going to pay tax to gift it to them, or you're going to have inheritance tax or income tax or capital gains tax when you do that as well. So that's that's another potential way forward for that. Okay, so with inheritance tax being the fastest growing tax in the UK, and it's just that, you know, it is a death duty, but it's capital gains tax when you die. It's taxing um, what you've earned and what you've built up and what your wealth is. And as we said at the beginning, the issue is with the tax swing is what is right and what is left. And if a government has a majority, they can make the law. If they decide um, that you should not own wealth, you should not be able to create wealth, that it shouldn't be owned by you as an individual, then it's possible for them to decide that you should pay more as income or capital or as death taxes. They could also introduce a wealth tax. This is the latest thing that could be introduced. I'm not sure if the UK would do it, but for example, they could tidy up all the council taxes and the stamp duties on buying and selling properties and just say, oh, if you own way, that would be a way of them being able to say to people, you've got an extra 1% tax. And again, it would end up being a bit more and a bit more. Follow our Living and Working Abroad show every week in the social media on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel and share, let people know. It's not too late before the autumn budget to plan ahead, but if you have got any residency or property abroad, you could take up your EU residency or a tax residency abroad and potentially save yourself income, capital gains tax, inheritance taxes going forward. If a UK expat's income is trapped in its pension fund in the UK, it's the biggest target. It's coming under inheritance tax. Will the inheritance tax bands reliefs change? Will the tax rates change? Will they be simplified upwards? Only by planning ahead, by making your choices, can you get ahead of the budget before the change of the law means you have to follow a different set of rules. At ProAct, we create family trusts for business. They can be taxable, but they can also be not taxable. It depends where the the trust is based. So a UK trust can generate taxes, but gifting into a family trust it can be tax-free. It keeps you under control. You don't need the assets to be in your name to be taxed in your name as a capital gain or inheritance tax for you to enjoy them. You can still sail the yacht, uh, stay in the villa, or live in the house. For more information and guidance on protecting your family's wealth, capital, shares, business and property from tax creep and from a swing into your estate, contact us at propartnership.com. Thanks a lot for listening. We'll see you next time.